Now, I'm trying to think back. Did I already call one of these nuggets in the CCDA series my favorite nugget? I hope I didn't, because this has got to be my favorite nugget. You see, I am currently studying to become a CCIE in the area of security. I'm trying to follow in my dear friend and CBT Nugget trainer Keith Barker's footsteps. I'm a CCIE in the area of routing and switching, and I want to add the CCIE in the area of security to that designation. This nugget is going to be all about designing security solutions. And we're going to go on an amazing tour of attacks and Cisco mitigation steps for these attacks. So, what exactly will we discover together in this particular CBT nugget? Well, first of all, I have to discuss the fundamentals of network security with you. Yeah, let's talk about the common types of attacks that we are going to face, and let's find out why this is such a big deal, this whole concept of network security. Then let's outline some processes that we can use. I want to give you some tried and true network security processes that are going to really help you and your clients keep themselves safe. Speaking of safe, that'll be our next section. We'll look at the security architecture for enterprise. How clever. Cisco came up with an acronym of SAFE to describe the umbrella of Cisco products that exist for security. In fact, that'll wrap up this nugget. We'll go through and talk about selecting the right security products for your design. It is amazing how many different security products we are going to discuss in these last two sections of this nugget. In fact, it makes this nugget worth it just to sort out all of the different security products that Cisco has in their portfolio. You'll emerge from this nugget being able to describe to customers all of the different security products, and that is valuable in and of itself. Now, before we get too deep into this, what is the big deal? I mean, why every time I open the Wall Street Journal, and by the way, that's of course on my iPad. I got rid of the print edition long ago. But when I open the Wall Street Journal each day, why is it almost every issue I see something somewhere on network security? Well, one of the reasons why is indeed money. The cost to large organizations regarding network security is huge. And how about the reputation of these organizations? And of course, their their reputation, easy for me to say, right? Their reputation ties back to money. Yeah, absolutely. I remember when Sony had their online gaming infrastructure compromised and all of that credit card information of all those gamers that were paying for monthly online gaming fees got compromised. There were some numbers about what that was going to cost them from a reputation standpoint. Southwest Airlines was very forthcoming in saying how much a network outage of their online presence would cost them. Just think if someone did a massive distributed denial of service attack, and we'll cover what that is here shortly. If someone did one of those attacks against them and brought down their online website, it was millions and millions of dollars that it would cost them. So, security is a huge deal now for these organizations. And I'll tell you something else. How about legislation? Yeah, more and more there are legislations like HIPAA and SOX and PCI DSS. And these legislations force companies to go ahead and really invest in network security. HIPAA is legislation about the health industry, SOX is legislation about the financial industry, and PCI DSS is about online credit card transactions. All of these are examples of legislations which force organizations today to really pay attention to network security so they don't end up breaking the law. So we know network security is a big deal, but what are the common types of attacks that we're guarding against these days and that we'll see? Well, I'm just going to give you an example of some. We could do, obviously, an entire CBT Nugget series on these various attacks and their mitigations. But let's talk about some of the classics. Recon attacks or reconnaissance attacks. This would be something like a ping sweep. And programs these days will combine this with port scans. Yeah, what's happening here is the attacker is trying to map out your network infrastructure. They are creating their own set of documentation about your network infrastructure so they can launch further attacks. Yeah, so often this is step one in further attacks that are going to be taking place against your network infrastructure. Isn't it sad to think that some attackers out there have better network documentation than the organization they're attacking? That is pretty sad. And this brings up an interesting point about reconnaissance attacks. If we were to completely mitigate them, right? If we were to make them virtually impossible to be carried out against your organization, that would penalize your organization because sure enough, your organization wouldn't be able to do a lot of the network management stuff they want to be able to do. Let me give you an example. It's ping sweeps. If we were to completely eliminate ping sweeps by eliminating the ability to ping in our organization, for example, then we're suffering because we can't do the cool network management utility of ping. So we constantly play a balancing act when it comes to mitigating attacks like reconnaissance attacks. You know, what's funny about these reconnaissance attacks, they'll often use tools that are indeed network management tools. Here is ZenMap. ZenMap is a graphical user interface version of Nmap. Yeah, and Nmap is often used to carry out these reconnaissance attacks. And this is a tool that's used to do network management. Here I put in the target of my 192.168.10 network, and I said I wanted it to do a quick scan plus. Notice there are many different types of scans we could have done, including the intense scan. But so that I could get these results quickly for us, I did a quick scan plus. This is pretty scary. All of the information I'm getting here about this network, there's my home router showing me what ports are open on that router. If I scroll down, here's my Anthony PC, and here are the ports that are open on that particular PC. So we're getting a look at all of this information. Here's my Apple TV. Oh boy, please don't hack into my Apple TV. What would I do without my Netflix, right? So anyways, you get the idea. These tools for performing reconnaissance are readily available now, very powerful, and we often use them to do forces of good, things like network management. Now we said that reconnaissance attacks are often step one. Well, step one, what in the world step two? Oftentimes this will be access type of attacks. You know what attacks fall in this category? Attacks against username and password combinations. Yeah, the attacker will get they'll know your network and know what's in your network and know what holes there are based on reconnaissance. Then they'll go after username and password information. Why did they do this? Because they want to get that information to escalate their privileges. Sure, they escalate their privileges on the network and then they access information that can either cause you great harm or embarrassment or will give them financial gain. A great information, of course, is hijacking credit card information from your customers, and then they go out and make small purchases with all those credit card numbers, and they gain some financial benefit from doing that. In username and password attack categories, we have things like brute force attacks, where literally they're just going to have applications that guess again and again and again and again, rapidly, amazingly quick, and they will attack your passwords. Related to this is dictionary attacks. Sure, the brute force attack will use a dictionary to fire password guesses at your particular username and password combination. This is why we preach never, ever, ever allow your engineers to set a password like Cisco. I mean, I would guess that right out of the gate because this is often a default password utilized by Cisco. Another one would be admin. I mean, these are horrible passwords because they would be guessed by a brute force attack in literally milliseconds. Now, something else that really is troubling in today's environment with access attacks is social engineering. And you might think, oh, I've heard about this. It would never happen to me. This would be like phishing, right? That's a great example of a social engineering type of an attack where they come up with a web page that looks like the web page of a legitimate organization, only it's an illegitimate version of the page. Another great example of social engineering is literally like someone calling in to your employees, pretending to be someone in the IT department, asking them for username and password information. Believe it or not, these social engineering attacks are indeed accounting for a majority of the issues that we face today. I mentioned the Wall Street Journal. There was just a big Wall Street Journal article about an attack against United States government organizations. How did it all start out? You guessed it. The whole problem that we saw in this massive attack against these government organizations all started out with simple social engineering attacks. So, we want to be aware of attacks like this so that we can educate our users against such attacks. Really get them to help us mitigate things like username and password types of attacks and social engineering attacks. But what category of attack probably keeps most network engineers up late at night? Yeah, what is it that they most likely fear most these days? It's availability attacks, specifically denial of service attacks. Yeah. Think about how relatively easy this is to do. So there's some key router in your organization, and sure enough, this key router is going to have a key interface or link. Think about how easy it would be to flood that interface with garbage traffic. I mean, that in itself is the simplest example I could give you of a denial of service attack, right? We just make this coordinated effort to flood some key interface with big packets. Maybe we just start firing video traffic at this particular interface to cause congestion problems. Denial of service attacks are simple like this, just flooding an interface with bogus traffic, to very, very sophisticated, but it all adds up to a nightmare for a network engineer. These can be very, very difficult to track down, difficult to guard against, and they're obviously pretty easy to implement. Now, if that didn't give you a bad case of heartburn, how about this? The distributed denial of service attack. With the distributed denial of service attack, and there has been some really famous ones like the SQL Slammer worm from years ago that literally brought down entire countries worth of the public internet. With distributed denial of service attacks, what the attacker does is they launch an attack that takes over machines. Okay, these machines become what we call zombies. and they'll go ahead and carry out the attack on behalf of the original attacker. And this situation typically multiplies exponentially, right? And we end up with just amazing numbers of zombie systems carrying out the attack. This is what happened in the famous SQL Slammer attack. This thing, by about 15 minutes into it, the number of infected machines had reached the tens of thousands, and it was wreaking havoc on the public internet. So, distributed denial of service attacks, yeah, they'll definitely keep you up at night. So, reconnaissance attacks, access attacks, availability attacks, we need solutions. And that's really what we're going to be discussing for the majority of the remainder of this nugget. So, at this point, I know what you're thinking. Anthony, you're insane. How could you possibly say that this is one of your favorite topics? You're about to have nightmares. You're about to be up all night worrying about reconnaissance attacks and access attacks and the very easy to carry out and devastating denial of service attacks. Well, good news. From here forward, we're going to focus on designing solutions to all these various big problems. And the first thing I want you to think about is something that we have talked about again and again in this Nugget series. It's the business needs of the organization. The exact security solutions that you're going to design and propose, it's all going to come down to making sure the organization fulfills its business need, its business goals. We're not going to implement security solutions just for the sake of implementing them. Something else that we're going to do is we are going to perform a thorough risk analysis for the organization. We're going to find out that not all areas of the organization's network experience the same level of risk, right? I mean, there's going to be some parts of the network that have high risk, some parts of the network that have low risk, just like there's going to be assets of high value and low value to the company. So we really need to do a thorough risk analysis. And you're going to help the company design its security policy. This is a written document, and the document is given to internal individuals, or at least portions of it are, and the document or portions of it might be given to external individuals like consultants. You're going to help the organization design best practices. That's right, and best practices, literally specific best practices. Some of them I'll be spelling out for you just to give you a good sense for what they might look like later on in this nugget. And then we're going to really help them to design their security operations. And guess what? This is a lot like a network's life cycle itself. It's going to be constantly evolving. You see, what you teach them to do is implement security best practices, and then you teach them to carefully monitor security in the organization. You'll also teach them to test themselves the security, and then, sure enough, they end up making improvements, and this thing starts all over again. So we secure, we monitor, we test, we improve, and we go through that cycle. Rinse and repeat, right? We keep testing and improving upon the security of the organization so that organization ensures they achieve their business goals. So Cisco came up with a real clever acronym, as I alluded to earlier in this nugget, and it's that secure architecture for the enterprise. The whole concept behind Cisco Safe is really a concept of layered defenses. In fact, the example that Cisco themselves will often give is a castle. We know the castle will have defenses, right? In fact, it's pretty funny. There's so many computer games now for the iPad, the iPod, whatever, the Android device, where you build some kind of a castle and then defend it. We know there would be those, what are they called? Torrents, I guess? I don't know. I know very little about this, obviously. But there were these tall columns at the corners of the castle, and they would put like archers up there, right? And then they would have individuals along the top of the walls that would dump burning oil down. And then what would surround the particular castle? Well, there'd be water in the form of a moat, right? And of course, there'd be some crocodiles in the water. Boy, what an artist I am, huh? So, anyways, it was a layered defense approach for the castle, right? Sure, it was. Yeah, and that's exactly what we seek to do with Cisco's Safe. Let me give you an example here of the first layer of defenses we can have in our network architecture. Yeah, the first layer of defenses? The network platforms themselves. Sure, we know Cisco is in the business now of selling integrated service routers. What's one of the services that these routers provide? Sure, security services. Let me just off the top of my head, honestly, I didn't plan on doing this. I really didn't in this nugget. Just off the top of my head, I'm going to go ahead and list some of the security features that we're going to find integrated into one of these integrated service routers. We don't have to use all of these, of course, but let me just tell you stuff that a modern Cisco router can do. Right off the top of my head, I'm going to do this, okay? We can do something called iOS-based firewall. Yep, we can do an iOS firewall feature. It makes the device work a lot like an adaptive security appliance. If that's not fancy enough, you can do a zone-based firewall with the device. You can do unicast reverse path forwarding to help guard against things like spoofing attacks. There are three huge security features right off the top of my head that these modern Cisco routers can implement. Of course, we know there's all kinds of access control lists that these things can implement. I mean, it's just amazing how many really in-depth, sophisticated security solutions now exist inside our devices. And this happens when we look at our Catalyst switches. Yeah, our Catalyst switches have built-in features like DHCP snooping, the ability to ensure that all the DHCP traffic in our environment is legitimate. IP source guard to guard against spoofing. We have the dynamic ARP inspection to guard against MAC address spoofing. We have port security. Yeah, a lot of times what you're going to find when you're designing network infrastructures for a company is that they didn't realize when it comes to security that their existing equipment could do so much. That's right. A lot of times when we're doing the design, we give them great news that they don't have to make this additional massive investment in security infrastructure equipment because they already have the capabilities they need in their devices. And of course, the ultimate device when it comes to security and the network platform is Cisco's Adaptive Security Appliance. We're going to be taking a more detailed look at the Adaptive Security Appliance here a bit later on in this nugget, but this is the premier Cisco security device. So much so that it put a couple of other devices out of business. It put the old firewall called the PIX from Cisco out of business. It put VPN concentrators out of business. It can do what they do, and that's give high volumes of VPN connections to the organization. And it's in some environments putting IPS out of work because the Adaptive Security Appliance can do intrusion prevention system. And if that wasn't enough, how about virus protection? Yeah, the Adaptive Security Appliance can even do that. So it is an amazing device for securing the network infrastructure. Something else Cisco does to really make sure we have a good, strong layered defense is they design components, they design software around what's called the security control framework. This says we need to be able to intelligently identify security issues. We need to stick around and constantly monitor for these. We need to be able to correlate events in our network to be able to tell that we're under attack. We need to be able to easily harden our equipment. We need to be able to isolate infected machines easily. And finally, we need to be able to enforce the overall security policy of the organization. These 6 principles Cisco really seeks to bring about through devices that they create and software that runs these devices or runs on the devices. Yeah, let me give you a quick example. We know that intrusion prevention systems from Cisco systems are amazing for identifying particular attacks and for monitoring the network. As a matter of fact, these devices can even look at things that are happening in the network and correlate that to give you an alert that there is an attack. Yeah, this is called profile-based intrusion prevention. And the intrusion prevention is literally educated about what's normal in your network environment. And if it sees something go out of that profile, it will alert you that it could be some kind of a security attack. When it comes to hardening your devices, Cisco gives us something called Auto Secure that we can run at the command line that'll automatically take a bunch of steps to ensure that your network device is secured. One such step would be to disable any services that might be running on the device that aren't really needed. So Cisco is constantly thinking about this security control framework and implementing it in the hardware and software services that they sell to us. Now, another huge layer of security design that Cisco really helps us with is this whole concept of trust and identity management. How do we manage users? How do we provision user accounts across all of our devices? How do we identify users of the network infrastructure? Cisco gives us many tools in this regard, including an architecture called AAA. No, this isn't the Automobile Association of America. No, this is authentication, authorization, and accounting services. Yeah, Cisco gives us products that are going to subscribe to this security model and give us real robust ways in which to identify users, authentication, to authorize these users to do certain things on the network, and then to keep track of what these particular users are doing. Cisco devices can subscribe to what are called identity-based networking services. In fact, Cisco adheres to 802.1x standards in their products. What 802.1x allows you to do is have a user that wants to get onto your network hit a Cisco device. Maybe this is a Cisco access point, a Cisco switch, and then have that device check with a AAA server. Cisco's AAA server products are the Access Control Server, or ACS, and another device we'll be talking more about a little bit later called ICE, the Identity Service Engine. So, notice, the user wants to get on the network, they hit a Cisco device, the Cisco device works with a AAA server thanks to 802.1x in order to find out who that person is and let them in. Something else that Cisco does is called NAC. Yeah, this is Network Admission Control. And once again, the user wants to get on your network, a device that supports NAC, and many of Cisco's devices do support NAC, will literally query that person. In fact, NAC can do something that is so cool. It can do what's called posture assessment. And what posture assessment is all about is not just finding out who this username is, who this user account is, but also finding out things like what operating system are they running? What patch level for that operating system are they running? Are they running the appropriate antivirus software? So, yes, it will literally assess the makeup of that system and make sure it meets your network security standards before it's permitted on the network. So, trust and identity management, a huge layer of this layered defense that Cisco can help us design. And this is obviously a critical component in securing the network. But you know what? It all starts with designing the physical security of the organization that you're working with. Yeah, we did this in Cisco's kind of order of design, but you could argue that this should be the very first thing. We should have talked about this much earlier in the nugget. But listen, it's no matter where you design the organization's, what step of this process you design the organization's physical security, we just got to know that this is absolutely imperative. I mean, you could have all the sophisticated software defenses and services in place that you could imagine perfectly configured. If someone can get to the network equipment physically, well, they can destroy it. I mean, think about the environmental things that they could do. They could kill the power to the device. They could cause it to be too warm or too cold or too humid in the area where this equipment is kept, and they could cause damage to it. Something else that Cisco puts in the area of threat defense design is their iron port equipment. Yeah, they have security devices called iron port. There is an iron port email security device that's very popular. It's called an email security appliance. And there is a web iron port security appliance. What is cool and exciting about IronPort is the fact that it uses a global database for protecting your web surfing and your email surfing. Yep, so email is coming into your organization. The IronPort device says, let me look in this email. And of course, it's respecting the privacy of the communications and stuff like that. It's just looking at it from a security perspective. And then it goes and it checks a database of everything that is suspect with email, either contents that are proven to be virus or a worm, and also who's sending it. Yeah, there's a database of individuals that are blacklisted because they're computer criminals. It's the same with web traffic. The IronPort device will analyze the web traffic and check it against a known database of potential issues, phishing sites and other, classic issues that we run into when we're web surfing. Now, we talked about it in our nugget on remote access. We talked about how everyone these days wants to VPN. I mean, people want to work from anywhere, anytime. They want to do it securely. They want to access the corporate resources. So VPNs are more popular than ever. Cisco responds with an amazing list of VPN alternatives. The first that I want to bring up is IPsec. This is the most popular site-to-site VPN approach, and Cisco recognizes this. This is why IPsec is supported on routers. Many of the multi-layer switches can do it, of course. The firewall product, the adaptive security appliance, can do it. And IPsec is mandatory now in an IPv6 implementation. So if your device supports IPv6, guess what? It supports IPsec because that is a mandatory component in IPv6. Cisco invented a solution called the Dynamic Multipoint VPN. This is for an environment where you have, let's say, headquarters and a bunch of branch offices. Okay? So you've got these branch offices, and they want to be able to dynamically VPN with each other and dynamically VPN with headquarters, and the dynamic multi-point VPN technology accommodates that. You want even more dynamic in your VPN implementation? Well, Cisco invented the Get VPN solution. With Get VPN, you literally can have a full mesh of on-demand VPN connections between your devices. And oh yeah, it even supports the multicast traffic in your environment. They invented EasyVPN. What EasyVPN is all about is setting up your, let's say, headquarters device so it can very easily accommodate a wide variety of incoming VPN connections. You might have someone coming in with what's called a clientless browser-based VPN. We'll talk about that in just a moment. It's called a secure socket layer VPN. You might have someone coming in with IPsec. You might have someone coming in with a software client like the AnyConnect client from Cisco Systems. And the headquarters router dynamically accommodates all these VPN requests and can even enforce policies like time of day restrictions and things like that, thanks to this EasyVPN configuration. EasyVPN is the most ironic term in all of Cisco networking because this is actually pretty darn difficult for us to set up. Easy is for the end user, easy is not for us as an administrator. So, one of the types of VPNs that they support is an SSL VPN. I just mentioned it down here. And this is a nice alternative where the user has just a web browser. And that's all they need to do basic VPN data acquisition from headquarters. In fact, if they get frustrated because their web browser can't get to all of the corporate resources they want, there's even a client-based SSL VPN. Now, this is pretty funny because you're kind of doing away with the whole beauty of it, and that is you didn't need any client software other than a web browser. But again, the idea is let's add some software on the client so they can get to more resources. Cisco's latest software for making VPN connections, full-fledged VPN connections, is called the AnyConnect software client. This is the replacement technology for the old VPN client software from Cisco. Cisco is ditching this concept of the VPN client software, and they renamed it the AnyConnect client just to really emphasize its flexibility when it comes to making a wide variety of different technology-based VPN solutions. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, this is amazingly complicated. I mean, we are talking about a lot of different Cisco products that fit into this safe architecture. There's lots of layers here of security that we're going to be responsible for. That's the whole idea behind it. Well, the good news is Cisco does make products to help you. One of my favorites is called the CSM. This is the Cisco Security Manager. Yeah, what it allows you to do is design a particular policy and then push that policy out to a wide variety of devices like Cisco routers, Cisco switches, Cisco firewalls. Okay? There's my drawing of a firewall. Isn't that great? So anyways, yeah, we design policy once, and then we push that out to all of the different Cisco devices. As you might guess, that really helps you design a consistency to the security policy, right? Yeah. I mean, we have an access control list that blocks certain known problematic IP addresses, and that consistently gets applied to all of your different devices thanks to the Cisco Security Manager. I had the privilege of teaching the very first CSM course for the very first CSM version. Yeah, it was some e-learning that I had the privilege to develop for Cisco Systems. It's a great product, and it's come a long way since version 1 that I did the training for. A product that Cisco unfortunately gave up on because I really thought it was pretty cool is MARS, the Monitoring and Analysis and Response System. This product is end of sale, and of course soon it will go end of life, and Cisco will no longer support it. What MARS does is it takes all of the messaging coming from all of your different Cisco devices. It takes all of the syslog messages. It takes all of logging, anything at all, any traps, SNMP traps that are set up. It just consumes all of the information that devices have the ability to convey in your network, and then it correlates them to present to you any, any suspect whatsoever of an attack. The MARS system tells you, look, I think we're under attack. And it shows you what devices are involved, and it will even make suggestions for rectifying the particular problem. What's strange is that Cisco is killing off MARS, as I indicated to you, and I have been asking them year after year what the replacement technology will be, and they don't know yet. So it's interesting. There's plenty of third-party people that do this kind of a product. So I guess this is just one of those areas where Cisco is leaving it to third parties. Obviously, I mentioned it earlier, the access control system helps you manage security in your environment, and so does a new product called the Identity Service Engine. Remember, these products surround the concept of AAA and network admission control. Both of the products do these things to try and control who is using your network and what they're able to do in your network infrastructure. Now, earlier we said that we certainly had to help our clients design security best practices, and I promised you that we'd cover some, and I keep my promises. Let's do that right now. One of the things that amazes me is how many organizations out there are still using Telnet. You absolutely have to stop them from using Telnet in their production networks and replace that with Secure Shell. Remember, Telnet as a remote access protocol is going to transmit its information in, clear text. Whenever we see the words clear text, we know this is a no-no from a security perspective. So let's get that replaced with Secure Shell. If they're absolutely forced into Telnet, you're going to need them to do the Telnet over a secured tunnel. So have them Telnet over a VPN. That's a lot of work. SSH is just a better idea. Make sure they adopt a AAA type approach to identity management. The worst thing they could do is try and do identity management on a device-by-device basis. Make sure they are practicing good syslogging techniques. Take the system messages from their Cisco devices and send them to a syslog server that can go ahead and alert them when there is critical events transpiring on the network. Make sure they are moving to a simple network management protocol version 3 environment. Why version 3? Well, as we've covered in this Nugget series, it's going to include security. Have them disable any unused services. So if they're not using the particular services that exist on a particular device, have them disable them. A great example of this is HTTP. You see so many Cisco devices with the built-in web server turned on unnecessarily. They're not using it for anything. How about replacing FTP in their organization with secure FTP? Kind of tags along with that replacing Telnet with Secure Shell idea. When it comes to the virtual terminal lines, yeah, that we're going to use for like SSH, let's lock those down with access control lists. That capability exists. We should take advantage of it. Engage in authentication at the control plane whenever possible. So if you're running OSPF in your environment, make sure these devices authenticate each other. If you're running EIGRP, make sure they authenticate each other. And finally, something that can help you with several of these, and I mentioned it earlier, take advantage of Cisco's Auto Secure capability. That's what it's called at the command line. The web-based version of that is one-step lockdown. Yep, with one-step lockdown, we can go ahead and use a graphical user interface, Cisco Configuration Professional, in order to lock down the system and disable a lot of unused services and help you put in good, strong passwording. So we know we want to wrap this particular nugget up with just a discussion of some of the main Cisco products that we're going to be helping a customer select and then design and implement. The Inter-Network Operating System is really something you want to emphasize, as I did for you in this particular CBT nugget. We know this is the operating system that we have in our integrated service routers and our CAT switches. I gave you examples of all of the amazing security capabilities that are in these particular devices. In fact, let me just show you quickly Cisco's Feature Navigator so I can make sure that you know how you can ensure that a feature that a customer wants is indeed supported in their particular version of hardware and software. An easy way to get to the Feature Navigator, this is so cool, so easy to remember. You go to cisco.com/go/FN. Yeah, that's it. You don't have to worry about some big URL that you'll eventually get to. Just do cisco.com/go/FN for Feature Navigator. Yep, and you will be here at the Feature Navigator. Once you go in, you can research particular features. So you could go in and you could say, all right, I'm interested in the zone-based firewall. Okay, so you'll go in and you'll do a search for zone-based firewall for this particular feature. Hey, here's zone-based policy firewall, and we can add that to our list of features that we are interested in having, and then we can find all of the various operating systems that are going to support that particular feature. That's just one way to use the Feature Navigator though, right? If you have a particular software image, we can go in and figure out the features that are supported in our particular software that we already have. We can compare two different software releases. We can even use the Feature Navigator to figure out, hey, what images are now end of life. So this Cisco Feature Navigator is going to be very important to us, not only when we're designing the security solution, but designing other solutions as well, right? Like, hey, what network management features do we have available for us in a particular code release? Now, the other huge product, obviously, we've alluded to it quite a bit, is the Adaptive Security Appliance. And there are many, many different models of Adaptive Security Appliance. There is the small device designed for a small office environment. And then there is the huge adaptive security product that would be appropriate for data centers. Let's visit cisco.com once again and see the variety that we have in these different models of Adaptive Security Appliance. So here we are at cisco.com, and I'm going to go to the top menu and I'm going to say Products and Services, and I'm going to grab the link for security products. Here in security, notice they're going to base it around the area of the network, right? So for instance, securing the data center is going to be separated from securing the edge and branch. Guess what? Yeah, from what I've already told you, you know that adaptive security appliances would be in just about all of these categories. Yeah. For instance, if I'm interested in securing the edge and the branch, I'm going to have the 5500 series next generation firewalls. These are adaptive security appliances. They might not be as robust as the ASAs for securing the data center, but once again, they are adaptive security appliances nonetheless. So notice at the very bottom, I always shoot to the very bottom of these pages. Here's what I care about. Here's all kinds of data sheets. Here's all kinds of at-a-glance descriptions and case study information about these particular devices. Here's a 5585X adaptive security appliance. And of course, we can go to that link, get more information about it. One of the amazing things that we see with this particular device is it supports 40 gigabits per second of firewall throughput. So if you're worried about your firewall in your network infrastructure being your bottleneck, that worry starts to go out the window when you look at some of these higher end ASAs. Now, the other category of product that's very important is Cisco's intrusion prevention systems. What's really interesting about intrusion prevention is that there are indeed standalone appliances that do it. Okay, so you can get a box that rack mounts with your firewalls and your routers and your switches, and it's an IPS appliance, right? You can do it in an appliance from Cisco. But what's really interesting about intrusion prevention is the fact that you can also do it inside your ASA with a special module you can insert in the ASA, or you can do it inside your iOS. Yeah, there is the IPS capability inside the Internet Network Operating System. So, lots of options from Cisco in the area of intrusion prevention. And guess what? For your higher end Catalyst switches, there are indeed security modules that you can insert. There is a firewall module you could insert. There's an IPS module that you could insert. So for something like a CAT 6500 series switch, you can basically stick an ASA inside it. You can basically stick an IPS appliance inside it thanks to modules that give you those capabilities that you can insert inside those higher end Catalyst switches. Finally, the last area that you'll end up helping your client select from is a wide variety of endpoint security solutions from Cisco Systems. Yeah, Cisco is starting to get into the software business pretty heavy. And part of that software business they're getting into is intrusion prevention systems, intrusion prevention software that runs on the PC. My goodness. So not only do we have intrusion prevention running on the network devices, we now have it on the PC. By the way, this gets a special name, and it's HIPS. Yeah, what a cool name, right? This is host-based intrusion prevention. And a lot of people say, well, does that replace my need for network-based? No, because remember, you want to build a layered defense. If the attacker gets through your network solution, then they have to get through your host-based solution. And that's a real nice layered approach to what we call defense in depth. This is all by Cisco's design to have many, many layers of security as we discussed in this important nugget. In this super important CBT nugget, we took a look at the fundamentals behind designing network security solutions. And you can't really discuss the fundamentals of this subject without giving some examples of what we fear today. One of those things we feared today we saw was the dreaded distributed denial of service attack. And I think that was an alliteration, wasn't it? Yes, the repeating of the D word, dreaded distributed denial of service. And that was just one of the many attacks that we saw that can impact dramatically an organization's desire to hit its goals. We talked about a lot of different security processes in this nugget that make sense for organizations. Things like designing best practices and designing physical security solutions and designing an overall life cycle of securing and monitoring and testing and improving. We took a look at the safe, the secure architecture for enterprise from Cisco, and we saw how it was a layered defense strategy that would really try and achieve the lofty goal of keeping organizations safe from many different types of attacks. And we wrapped it all up by taking a look at the major product categories from Cisco Systems, and we learned something pretty exciting, that there's a lot of security features right inside the iOS that we might be able to take advantage of. Well, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.